Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Civic Works Committee for July 17th, 2017. I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll look to the committee for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure the correct order in which to do this, but I see that there's an added item on this week's agenda, item 22, which I will have a pecuniary interest on. However, as a order of process and not directly to the item, I do have concerns with that being on today's agenda, a day ahead of when the public was expecting to see it, and wonder if it shouldn't be deferred to a future agenda. So I won't speak to the item, but I will declare pecuniary interest and suggest that perhaps it be put on a future agenda so that the public has notice and an opportunity to see it. If people are planning to attend tomorrow and learn that we've dealt with it today, I think we may have some concerns.
Okay, thank you. We will address that at that point. I see no other disclosures. So we'll move forward then. I'm going to look to the committee and ask if we can deal with item number 19 first, which was a letter from Councillor Zafman regarding the Hydro One Beautification Fund. That's something that we can deal with fairly quickly. So if that's fine with the committee? Okay, I see nods and smiles, and so let's move to that item. Councillor Zafman, would you like to speak to that first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, appreciate the committee's indulgence in dealing with this quickly at first. Through you, just a quick explanation. Through a significant area of Ward 14 along Highbury Avenue, most specifically, Hydro One recently went through and did some clearing of foliage in the area to make sure, as part of their ongoing maintenance, that nothing would impact, obviously, the hydro line corridor. Unfortunately, though, many homes in Ward 14 back onto Highbury Avenue. And so now what they were used to for many, many years was green foliage, in part to their experiences, somewhat of a noise barrier, but also a nicer viewpoint than Highbury, which is essentially almost a highway at that point at 100 kilometers an hour. And so my understanding in inquiring with Hydro One was that as a result of this clearing, they would then give to the City of London some fund for a beautification fund, essentially for replanting that vegetation in an off-corridor location. What I was hoping to inquire today through the committee and to staff, what sort of funds actually exist, how much is actually being given, and if any consideration can be given to assist at all with the area which was recently cleared. I know from speaking with staff that there is a limited area because the corridor does cover a lot of it, but if there is any area, either public or private, that these funds can be directed to assist in sort of reclaiming what was taken away, that is what I'm trying to inquire for today.
Thank you very much, and I know my ward also shares a swath of that clear cutting, and it was quite a disappointment to the people who would walk through there and enjoy the trees. Of course, they've been removed. I'll go to staff first. Maybe they can describe what's happened there and the fund.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor. I apologize, but I actually don't have the details on that fund. Something that we can go back and talk to the various departments and get more of those specifics. In terms of replanting along that corridor, as you had indicated, it is a very wide hydro corridor. The majority of that open space between the homes and Highbury Avenue actually is a Hydro One corridor. So what we can endeavor to do is take this back, and we can report back in terms of what we can do with those funds and where we can actually do that replanting. We do have right away there along Highbury, along the west side, but that actually might be quite limited in terms of space as well. If the goal from Hydro One is to keep all that area clear, it is a very large width that they have there, and we'll have limited opportunity to replant. So we'll take this back and see what we can do in speaking with Hydro One and where we can actually utilize those funds.
Thank Thank you. When I was discussing it with Hydro One at the time, they said they were removing the trees from underneath all their lines, but we're planting, I think they called it a pollinator mix. So some wildflowers of sorts, but certainly nothing of the height that would, I think, have the impact you would hope for. So anything further, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, just back to staff, thank you. And I think just on behalf of the residents, I think they appreciate just an inquiry into seeing what can be done with those funds, because obviously they feel like they've, lost something, which if it can be brought back to any extent, I think would be a great help to them. So thank you for doing that.
All right, thank you. So I think we probably just need a motion to receive. Oh, Councillor Ridley, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I was just wondering, the councillor is unable to make a motion as he's not a member of this committee, and it sounds like staff are agreeable to following up with Hydro One and reporting back. So I'd like to make a motion to request that staff contact Hydro One about these funds and about tree planting and report back to the committee.
Thank you. And I see Councillor Armstrong would like to second that motion. So I'll ask our clerks to put something to that effect up. Any further comments on this issue? All right, we'll just wait for that to happen. We'll be moving on to the consent items, and I have two which have been pulled, number 8 and 10. Councillor Usher.
Mr. Chair, just before you go to the consent item, may I just ask a quick question, because I was not aware that you had an item number 22 on the agenda, and I just would like some clarification, because this is also on the Committee on Protective Services agenda. I believe that this is the rightful place for it, but it was also, so can you explain to me ask the clerk to explain where we stand with this?
Okay, yes, while we're waiting for our motion to come up for number 19, I'll ask the clerk to respond to what happened with respect to item number 22.
Yes, there was miscommunication, and unfortunately that matter was placed on the Community and Protective Services Committee agenda rather than Civic Works Committee. So to correct that, it has been moved over to Civic Works Committee, and there's a notation on the added Community and Protective Services Committee agenda which indicates that that had been done. So it effectively removes it off of CAPS and puts it onto CWC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, because I'd like to address that. I had intended to address it in the other meeting, but since it's here, I'd like to address it also at the time when you bring it up.
Thank you. All right, I see we have a motion on here. It's been moved by Councillor Ridley and seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Any further discussion on the Hydro Corridor Beautification Fund? No, let's call that question then.
Opening the vote.
Did I misspeak? Hydro 1. Oh.
Thank you. I just caught, when I went to vote, it says London Hydro, but it should be Hydro 1. I understand it'll be changed for council. Thank you.
You need to vote.
Pardon? So.
Voting is commenced, so if you'd like to conclude voting, we will make sure that that's changed to Hydro 1 when we do the report.
Closing the vote. Motion pass 4-0.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Zaitman, for that. Let's move on to the consent items then. And I'd like to, okay, so we'll deal with all the consent items except 5, 8, and 10. 5? Any others? Right, so I'll take a motion for items 2 through 18, save 5, 8, and 10. And, oh, I have another one, perhaps? Okay. All right, so now I'll go to committee for comments on these items or questions. Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on item 4, and it's in Appendix A, if that gives staff time to flip. It's just something I hadn't seen before, I don't recall seeing, and it was a $39,000 expenditure on a line that states city-related expenses. And I wonder if someone could provide clarity as to what that line item is. I see a lot of different line items, but I'm not used to seeing that one.
Through the chair, yes, sometimes we incur expenses where we have to make signs, and we incur costs for that and for a specific project, and those are put through that line item. You often see smaller amounts like this going through on a lot of the road construction projects.
So that would just be materials that we would have purchased or utilized specific to this project. We're not moving money from another budget, such as staff time or anything like that?
Correct.
Thank you. Any other comments? Maybe I'll just say we've got some good news with number 13, the Waste and Erosion Control Infrastructure Program. So we have a nice partnership with Upper Thames Conservation Authority, and these are 50 cent dollars for those repairs. So that's a boon for the city. I also want to thank Councillor Usher for coming, although there was no questions. He's the chair of the Waste Management Working Group, and he's attended our meeting in case anything came up there. So at this point, I think we can call the question on these items.
Opening the vote. Closing the vote. Motion pass 4-0.
Moving on to item number 5, and I'll go to Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you to staff, and I have to apologize, I meant to send a message just so that you'd have a little prep time, but on item number 5, to do with the infrastructure and specifically the study area, I believe you're calling it Churchill, or Vancouver Street, Wavell, Pottersburg Creek, Dundas. It's a pretty big area where most of the other infrastructure issues are a street. This is a big area. So I just wanted to ask you, because I know there are people out there in the community listening, can you sort of help me and help them, give us a very light overview of what will this mean potentially down the road to the residents in the area? And specifically why I'm asking is I've had a lot of concerns raised about the sewers in that area and lack of or none. And I can tell you today, I can take you there, and there's some of those streets have huge puddles. The sewers are not working at all. So, and there's nothing to fix. They go nowhere. So if you can just give us an understanding how this would roll out the study and that sort of thing.
Through the chair, absolutely. Many of these areas, when we go into them for the first time, we have to start from scratch and undertake an area-wide study to understand exactly where our outlets are going to be and the sanitary needs. So this area specifically, as you've mentioned, it's underserviced. So we need to start from scratch, come up with a plan, and then move forward. Tom Copeland, the division manager of wastewater and drainage engineering, he can provide a little bit more information for us.
Thank you. Through the chair, the councillor is right the area is underserved by storm sewers, and that's the main reason of the study. So before we launch into infrastructure replacement projects, we want to have a good plan on where those new storm outlets will be, or if existing outlets could be utilized. So this study sets up a number of years future work for actual infrastructure projects.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to assume that when this is all done, you will have identified the streets that are below standards, and that and then there'll be an action plan which streets are going to get done first. Now I know that some of the streets are scheduled to be done in the near future. So will this be completed in time to make sure that road work, curbs and gutters, sewers are all tied in together, and that those streets that have been already selected as being renewed shortly, meaning in the next few years, that there won't be any delay because of this study?
Through the chair to the councillor, I can't say that there won't be any delays, but the whole idea is to see where the best appropriate storm outlet is. So you work from the downstream end and come up. So at the conclusion of this study work, we'll have a phasing strategy for the other streets in that area that make engineering sense.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I have a mover for that. Perhaps someone would second this staff recommendation, and I'll call the question.
Opening the vote. Closing the vote. Motion passed 4-0.
At this point, we're moving on to item number 8. And I'm going to ask my vice chair, Councillor Squire, to take the helm.
You want to move? Or do you need?
Oh, I think if you're fine taking it from there,
Fine
that's
to
good.
do it from here. Did anyone want to hear from staff first on this matter? No? Okay. Councillor Ridley.
I first of all want to thank staff for the report back. I know this was something that Councillor Van Holst and I requested a number of months ago. In reading the report and understanding the cost concerns, one question that I really had on this was, is there a way that if people are struggling for the upfront cost to resize a meter, that we can help them to phase that on their bill over the next, 3 to 6 months? So where they would save in the water meter versus they're paying too much in the past. I think sometimes that upfront cost is difficult for someone to come up with if they're not expecting it on top of their regularly large meter rental costs. So I wondered if there's a way that we could phase that in over a few months. So if someone has an appropriately sized meter and they want to do it, that they're absorbing those costs on their own and then realizing the savings.
Through the chair, so the costs that are outlined in the bylaw currently for replacements of water meters, it's $300. For the most part, most of the users that would have these larger, like a meter that is larger in size that could be downgraded, would be medium density or high density. There may be a few different residential, single-family residential homes. What we're finding that for the majority of people that would reduce their meter size, the payback would be in the level of about 4 months to get back that $300 if that size of meter was not appropriate for their building. Again, we would suggest that anyone that would be looking at reducing their meter size, that they work with an engineer or a plumber to determine that, because it does have impacts on their ability to have fire flows and those things within their building. We don't currently have a methodology for putting that charge on successive bills. We would have to make a change to our water bylaw if we were to look at anything like that.
Follow up?
Thank you, Acting Chair. I know my colleague has some comments as well, and I'm happy to hear those, but I think I'd be interested in pursuing, looking at making that change. I think for some people who are getting a $400 a month water bill, and we say, you know, plus if we want us to right size or downsize your water meter and it makes sense, it'll cost an extra $300. That's just a lot for someone to come out with, where you are correct, they're gonna save that in 4 months. But I think some people will struggle with doing that on the upfront. If there's a way that we can allow them to downgrade it when it's appropriate, but that they're gonna absorb that cost and we can phase it over a period of time. That's something I'd be interested in pursuing and having staff come back to us on. But I'll reserve the rest of my comments for my colleagues' comments first before I make that motion.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you very much. I did prepare a motion and had that circulated, where I'm asking staff to do two things. One is to contact the people that are in the position of having an oversized meter, or potentially so meters above the minimum size. My experience with residents and business owners has been that they didn't really understand the implications of our bill change back in 2013. We did say in our communication that they could save money if they ensured their water meter was the right size. I'm not sure that people necessarily understood what that meant, because they've just come to me and said, I can't pay this bill anymore. It's too much. And finding out that it's a lot more. In one instance, a person's bill doubled from about $1,500 a year to $3,000. So it's a substantial amount. So that went up. And I think what I would like to see is us communicate so people know that and can downsize it. They'll have to look to find out if that's the case. In our communication, we should probably say that we expect that their meter is correctly sized, but there's the potential that if it's oversized, they could be paying hundreds of dollars more. So the average is perhaps $600 more a year that somebody's paying. However, as I said, in one instance I've encountered, it's much more than that. A business owner with a very small building had a two-inch pipe coming in, and he also had a valve where it was cut off by about 90% to make up for the fact that he didn't need all that water flow. But this is something that had been put in a long time ago. It was no fault to the owner that it was there, and it really didn't matter until we made the change. And then it had these financial implications on them. Now, because they've been paying so much more over the last number of years, I think the city can simply pick up the $300 in those instances where somebody finds out and has a professional say that, yes, this was oversized. But I do believe we need to do something about it, because up to this point, those people have simply been paying more than they needed to. From this point forward, if we don't act, we're knowingly allowing them to pay much more than they have to. And, ethically, you could consider that all right or not all right. From my perspective, it's not all right.
Mr. Chair, do you have a motion? You indicated you had circulated a motion. I'm not sure. Perhaps we can get that up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I asked the clerk to circulate that, but she should have that available for us to look at.
So let's see if we have a mover and seconder for that.
Okay, well,
Let's just wait a moment to let people read it. All right, somebody prepared to second that?
Well, I have a question. Are you chairing?
Yeah. You have a question about the wording of the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I
You
guess
have a question about the wording of the motion?
I don't have a question about the wording of the motion. I read the.
Perhaps we can see if it gets seconded, and then we can have debate on it if we get to that point.
Okay, well, I'll second it so that we can discuss
All
it.
right, then go ahead. Second it and go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to staff, you have the motion in front of you, and I don't know if you saw the motion earlier, but I'd like to hear from staff their thoughts on the motion.
Through the chair, reaching out to our customers and letting them know that potentially they could investigate the appropriate sizing of their meter within their building is not a problem. That's something that we can do quite easily. There's going to be a cost and a complexity for doing that work. They would be required to hire a professional plumber or engineer to ensure that the proposed meter size would be appropriate to maintain building safety systems like fire flow, water flow to upper units in multi-family residential. With respect to B, we don't have a program in place that would fund this sort of work. And in some cases, they may not actually have overpaid. It does depend very much on the specifics of the building and how the meter ties into actual water use. But certainly we can reach out and suggest that if people wished to investigate the size of their meter, that they could hire a professional to support them in doing so. But knowing that that would be fully at the owner's cost, it would be inappropriate for us to assess the performance of private systems on private property.
Thank you. I guess the thing is, it sounds like some of the motion staff can deal with. Some of it, there may be some work that needs to be done. I wonder if this is something that perhaps the mover of the motion might consider having this referred to our staff and let them come back with costs and details and give them a little time to work on it, because some of it sounds like they can support, and others parts of it they haven't looked at. And so I think, in fairness to them, to give them an opportunity to sort of critique this, make sure that we're not getting into troubled waters. I don't know how you'd feel with the mover would feel about that.
Are you interested in moving, it's up to you, moving a referral, or this counselor can do it to my right?
I'm not, I think, is the issue simply the, whether or not we cover the cost of the meter? So there's a $300 charge for the meter change. It was my feeling that, that would have been well covered by, previous payments. Realizing that the average person is paying $600 more than they might have had the meter been the correct size. That would they've been paying that $600 for since 2013. So I don't have a problem supporting that. I realize it'd have to be found somewhere in the budget, but I'm sure that could be taken out of the wastewater. So I think that's maybe the issue. So I suppose we could split this out, but I'm not sure exactly what they would need to come back with, because we did say, look at this, and they've given their report.
I think the answer is no. To referral. Councillor Ridley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had previously indicated in motion I would be interested in moving, but a willingness to see my colleagues' motion. I won't support the motion that's before us, and if it fails, I would put forward another motion to have staff investigate, coming back with a way for people to finance these changes where it's appropriate. One of the major reasons that I'm not going to support the motion is if you reference page 71 of our agenda, right at the bottom, and it talks about the costs, the upfront capital costs, the loss in revenues, and that's a $600,000, that's $0.6 million that we would be asking staff to take away from something else to implement this type of change. And I wonder, do you have $600,000 in your budget, the $200,000 upfront and the loss of $400,000 revenue to cover this? Sorry, that's a question to staff.
Through the chair, the short answer would be no.
So making this kind of change is going to impact something else down the road. I think that there are ways that we can address this. I think if there's people who have meters that are not right-sized for their property, that can and should be fixed. And I think that there are ways that we can do that that are going to help people mitigate the cost. And so I'm going to vote against this, and then I'm going to put forward another motion. I'm still happy to support the piece of encouraging people to inform themselves about their own home and the type of meters that they have to make sure that they're right-sized for their residents or their business. I'm totally okay with that part, but I think in terms of the cost to do this, that I think it's something that we can expect homeowners to do and to realize those savings for themselves for many years to come when they right-size their meter.
On this motion, Councillor Armstrong?
I wonder if this were referred back, whether or not, through you, Mr. Chair, to our staff, would you be able to report back and give us a full picture and answer any concerns and, you know, as far as where the money might come from, if there's money and so on, if it was referred to you in a short period of time, like in this, for the next meeting, or that be asking too much?
Through the chair, we certainly could provide information back as to where we'd recommend funding come from, whether it's the reserve or other projects. We won't be able to make the July 1st meeting, July 31st meeting. It's coming up fairly quickly, but we should be able to make either August or September. We just need to take a look at deadlines.
In light of that, I wouldn't want this thing to fail, so I'm going to withdraw now, if I can. The rules allow it, my second. And I think this issue should be referred to our staff. And obviously there's a councillor's going to make a motion. So I don't want to see this not have a thorough review and report back. So I'm going to withdraw my second.
Thank you very much. Okay.
The motion's not, it'll have to be seconded, so is somebody going to second it?
What?
He withdrew his second, so you need a second?
But I can still, we're a committee, I think I can still just speak to what's...
But there's no motion on, I mean, my ruling would be that there's no motion on the floor now. There may be a motion to follow, but there's no motion now.
Okay, so perhaps through speaking, we can come up with a motion, and perhaps the motion is a referral, so there was the hint of that. Perhaps I can speak to a potential
Okay, somebody
referral.
want to put another motion on the floor? Councillor Ridley. This is getting fun.
It's getting, I think, a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. I think staff have heard our discussion and our interest in right-sizing the meters, so I would like to put a motion on the floor to refer this matter back to staff, come back to us with some options. I will be upfront with the committee. I'm not interested in realigning our budget to the tune of $600,000 upfront and $400,000 a year, but I respect that staff may look at that option and report back on it. So this time, I'd like to refer this matter back to staff to come back and present us with some options that will allow people to right-size water meters on their property. I don't know if I have a seconder.
Let's get that motion. Let's get that motion up first.
You second it.
Okay. Oh, so do I have to withdraw this? Well, I can second referral, and then
Okay,
at this point,
let's get the motion up, and then we can deal with the motion.
okay. I suppose I could make a point of order as well. And, or point of clarification, could we not have just dealt with B then?
There was no seconder for your motion. All right, the motion's up. You need a mover and seconder.
Staff review? No.
right, it's been moved and seconded. Anything on the referral? Councillor Helmer, I'll let him go first. Maybe he'll.
Thank you. So first I have a question, which is what properties, generally speaking, have the oversized meters?
Through the chair, for the most part, the oversized meters that are larger than the minimum size would be in high-density residential, medium-density industrial, institutional, commercial premises. Rarely, sometimes for the purpose of irrigation, a single-family home might have one that's one step up to allow them to have improved water flow for their watering their plants, but that's, for the most part, that's where you're going to see them.
So just for my colleagues to consider, I don't see the problem. So if you have a meter that's too big for what you need, you should change it and you should pay to change it. I just don't get what the problem is that we're trying to solve wholesale across the board. We have a lot of things that we do need to work on, like around flooding and all kinds of things that are essentially public problems that need to be solved. This is a private problem, primarily borne by businesses. It doesn't cost a lot of money. The payback period is very short. People who want to change them out can. The thing that I do support is telling people that they might have this issue and informing them about that. I think that's very smart. And then they can take that information and make the decisions that they think they need to make. I don't support the idea of what was on the floor earlier, especially with like the big expenditure by the city to solve it.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to thank the councillor for Ward 1 for bringing this to the committee's attention. I think it's an issue that our staff should review and report back on, so I can support the referral. And I think again, we need to have more information on this, an overview and some options on how to deal with it. So I think our staff can come up with that, give us a full picture, and then we can make informed decision. And again, thanks to Councillor for Ward 1 for the work on this.
Councillor Usher, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. And I didn't come here to talk about this, but I read the report and I thought that the report was relatively clear. We are the ones who should be making the decision at this committee. We should be referring this back to staff because staff has already outlined exactly what we could do or what we shouldn't do. I think that it's just a matter of reading between the lines. So I have two questions, if I may, to ask through you to staff. What I gather from this information is that if we were to, whether we or the owners would downsize their meters, does it affect the water pressure? And we got to understand who's responsible, who owns that water meter, who put it there? Is it the owner or is it the city? I think that those two things needs to be made clear.
Through the chair, the meter is owned by the city. It's installed by the city, but we size it based on the requirements of the building. So there's a few different things that are used to base your sizing of a meter, including the number of units, the equipment that's being used, the fire suppression requirements within the building, and that would be sized based on the recommendation of the professionals working for the building owner.
Okay, so the way I understand it is that if you were to change that water meter and you change it to a smaller size, it could affect the water pressure. The water pressure could be lower, and that could be detrimental to the occupant. I always thought that the city owns the water meter, but when I read the report here, it identified that the water meter was put in by the owner, at least by somebody at the owner's expense. And that's what I was trying to get at. Why is it that we are trying to take that expense responsibility? Can you just clarify that?
Through the chair, sorry for any confusion. So the actual meter is owned by the city. We install it on behalf of the owner. We maintain it, we replace it ultimately. It's something that is under our ownership. And we install it based on the recommendation of the sizing requirements for the building. So the professional would say, if you need a 2-inch water meter, then we would install a 2-inch water meter for them. But it is owned by the city.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, did you want to, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, please. So I perhaps just reiterate the purpose of this motion is that I don't believe that when we made the change in 2013, we communicated adequately the potential impacts for cost for this. So, and that there are people that are paying much more for their water than they need to because the meter was oversized to start up with. That didn't matter before we made the change, it does now. So I want to make sure that they do understand that and have a chance to change that down. I think that because we're partially to blame for the situation and they have already paid enough to cover any change in the meter, that it was okay for us to cover that. That's something that committee could decide, and I realize would or wouldn't. With respect to the costs there, although the $200,000 that was suggested, this is if 10% of the people switch their meters, that's how much it would cost us. I'm fine however council decides about that. However, to look at the $400,000, which certainly 10% of these people may not need to change it, but that money, for us to say, hey, we need that money, we need to really think about that because, right, this is money that our property owners don't need to be paying. They don't need to be paying that much. And for us to consider that ours is, I don't know, something to think about. If I was going to make a little joke about it, I might say, what we need is ways to stay in the black that don't require our souls to be the same color. So, right, I don't want to be kind of ripping people off or not letting them know that they could be paying less. So that's, again, up to the committee. But I'm pleased that we're going to go forward and communicate that to everyone. It's just a matter of how that's being paid for. Councillor Ridley is suggesting that it be put on their taxes. Are they allowed to pay it a little bit at a time? I'd be happy just paying it ourselves, but that would be something, I guess, for council to decide if this has to go back to staff to articulate those options better on here, then we can decide at that point. But I'll leave it. It looks like our motion is for a referral, so we'll have to leave it to the staff to articulate those, but I hope that you will. Here's the things that we could do, put them in there, and then we can simply decide. Had they been in here today, those options, and I thought that was going to be the case, then this would have been a much quicker debate. But, so thank you. That concludes my
Anything
motion.
further on the referral? Just from the chair briefly, I'll be voting against it. I was in support of the staff recommendation. So, without any further, call the vote. Mr. Mayor, you have the opportunity to vote here on this interesting issue.
Pleased to be here.
Timing is everything, Mr. Mayor.
Four.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. I appreciate your work, and I like to pass the challenging ones off to you. Now back to the regular scheduled programming, which is item number 10, our staff report on the high-speed rail. I had a number of questions on that. I'll go to Councillor Squire first.
Yeah, I just want to say that I've just heard from so many people, business people and otherwise, on how important this would be if indeed it happens. It would indeed be important to the city. It's constantly people are telling me how important that intercity transportation is. And it would be great. The one area though I wanted to, so I think it's great if it does happen. But the one issue I did want to ask about was the idea of a multimodal station, which also was of great interest to me. The reason I'm asking is I'm just wondering if that'll require any adjustment to our BRT plans, because of course, right now our BRT is going on King Street and Queens and isn't actually going to connect up, as I understand it, to that area, that station. So I just wonder if there's going to be flexibility in that area to make a change. Is that something we might look at, or is it something that we may not? I don't want to hold you to that, obviously. Because my understanding of multimodal will be that the buses, intercity buses will go there, train will go there, all of those forms of transportation. I just thought it might be something to look at.
Okay, staff to respond to that.
Thank you. Through the chair, we agree this is an exciting and important project for London. And what this report essentially does is move forward the province's position and the content of their report for endorsement by council. With respect to integration with SHIFT, we have a lot of time to pursue those options. And in fact, the direction we received from council back in May was to consider how we could link SHIFT better to other modes, including the airport and the existing bus and railway stations. So that is part of our work plan, and we believe we have the time in the relationship with the province to collaborate with them as this project goes from idea, hopefully, to something that starts serving Londoners.
Councillor Squire.
Just to follow up, I know there was discussion at one time about joining up at the airport. Is that something, I mean, are we now looking at joining up at a different place, being the VIA station, or is that something that may still happen? I just was a little confused about that, if you could help.
I apologize if I contributed to that through the chair. The direction from council in May asked us to look specifically at both the Greyhound and VIA stations as well as the airport for SHIFT. So looking at how we could connect to a potential multimodal hub, regardless of the location, although we do anticipate that it would be downtown, would be part of our work plan for SHIFT as well. So it's compatible with the work that council has asked us to undertake and with the province's work plan as well.
Councillor Usher.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think that what Mrs. Chair says makes a lot of sense if we get it working. My big concern is that it's the location, and looking out 10, 20, 50 years from now, is that what we want? Do we want that kind of edifice right here in the center of the city? We got a lot of problems with trains passing through our city today as it is. We're adding more now. I'm not against adding more if we can facilitate it. And I'm just wondering, when I look around there, I really don't see the land. We're talking about 3 tracks of via rail, 2 tracks of high-speed rail. And I see the BRT a little distance away, but within the same compound, so to speak. And everything that I have heard about high-speed rail is always, and there's nothing to say that this is confirmed, but we always talk about it being closer to the 401 or along the 401. So does this mean that we are going to expand that sort of facilities from York Street to Horton Street in order to accommodate that width? Because obviously we're going to need more. And I'm just weary about having all these tracks passing through the city. It looks good today, but I just wonder in the year 2040, 2060, whether we're going to regret this decision that we are trying to make today. So that's my concern. I wonder if anybody could give any thought to that.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Soldo may wish to add to this because he's been quite involved with discussions with the province. What we're asking committee and ultimately council for at this time is to endorse the idea of a high-speed rail connection between London and the GTA, essentially, and to consider the potential for a downtown intermodal station. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to finalize a plan, and it is a plan that will be led by the province, including the acquisition of real estate, both for that potential hub as well as for the tracks themselves. So they're really just at the starting phase of this right now, and they do have a great deal of work and consultation to do. And we are at the table with them regularly.
Mr. Mayor. Oh, Councillor Ush, you had another question.
I I really appreciate that answer. But, you know, I hate the word "but" really, because I'm not trying to dispute or debate you. I'm trying to point out some things here. And I'm just concerned when you use the word downtown that I've seen this happen in other places, and even today we keep talking about moving our trains and our tracks out of the city. And with that cumbersome nature, and as the city grows, when high-speed rail comes, I could see our city begins to grow more than 1% per year. And if that happens, we're going to reach a time, it might be 2050, when we're going to say this was the wrong place. And from a high level, coming through the city is fine. Whether it's on the 401, whether it's down at Dingman Drive, or whether it's up at Sunningdale, or whether it's right in the center of the city. That's hopefully, in that answer that you gave, it's something that could be decided, that there's no fixed nature that at that spot where it is on York Street, that's going to be the hub. That's what I'm concerned about, that specific location. I just want to know that we are flexible enough that by the time it comes, we could accept high-speed rail passing through a different location rather than right in the center, if necessary. And only some studies will be able to tell that. So I just wonder, I'm not going to say any more, but I just wonder if staff could just add a little bit to what they said just now to that.
Thank you through the chair. Mr. Soldo will have some more comments because he is at the table with the province. They will have to demonstrate, the province will have to demonstrate that their plans will work in the context of London, both now and in the future. And those are concerns that, of course, we're aware of as participants. But I'll ask Mr. Soldo to comment on the nature of the discussion so far.
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. In any environmental assessment, the province will have to look at numerous options coming in on the various railway lines that currently exist today, following a hydro corridor, following the 401, going around the city, going through the city. Those are all options that they will look at, but the preliminary discussions in their report indicate it's downtown to downtown to downtown, because that's where people want to go. They don't want to have a stop out in the middle of, by the 401 where there's nothing around there. So really what you're trying to do is connect city to city. And the only way to do that is to take that line through your city. Where the station is itself, that's up for discussion and evaluation as part of the environmental assessment. But that is something that they'll be looking at through the environmental assessment process.
And thank you. I'll go to our mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll deal with Part B first, because I really see this as a huge opportunity for our community. I think Councillor Usher is quite right to look 20, 30, 40 years down the road and to think about what kind of impacts that a project like this could have. I certainly don't foresee any at-grade crossings for high-speed rail through our city, so I see this as an opportunity where the province needs to come forward, purchase real estate, design a corridor that works for us, and that could also benefit us in many other ways. Any of those at-grade crossings could be eliminated, and we could see those trains come right into our downtown and connect us with Kitchener-Waterloo and with Guelph and with Toronto and eventually with Windsor, and this is extremely exciting. I'll speak to A now, and I just encourage my committee colleagues to endorse this wholeheartedly. This is an absolute game changer for London. It's a game changer for Southwestern Ontario. We've been talking about it for 40 years. It would effectively shrink the distance between the GTA, Guelph, Kitchener-Waterloo, and London, and then as we move into the second phase with other cities in Southwestern Ontario as well, fundamentally changing the way that we move across the Southwest and changing our economy in so many different ways. And so this, I think we've talked a lot about this as an opportunity. It's extremely exciting. The best time probably for the provincial government to have done this would have been 40 years ago. The next best time is today. And so I think we should endorse this, allow them to get moving forward further on the plans and look forward to 2025 when we see high-speed rail here in London.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so it looks like for number C, we won't be needing to twist your arm very hard to send a letter of endorsement for this. Maybe I'll point out that in item number 14, we are expanding our Shift Rapid Transit engineering, so we're actually looking at going further south on Wellington Street with the potential of parking out there for people coming in on the 401, which would be able to come into the center modal hub using our rapid transit. So we're making those regional connections is also something that we're thinking about. So I'll go at this point to Councillor Park, who's also with us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out three really important words that are at the beginning of the front page of the London Plan: exciting, exceptional, and connected. And I won't beat the horse too much here because a lot of great things have already been said, but making sure that we have that connectivity between our local transit, cycling transit, and all those sorts of things is really important going forward. And I think we need to listen to our neighboring communities because they'll be having a lot of these similar conversations about how do they deal with this change in their downtown area. And as the downtown councillor, I'd welcome this multimodal hub with open arms. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments on this one? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I certainly can support A, B, and C, but I guess the thing is we talk in B about the downtown, and the downtown of today could be very much different in the future than it is today. Number one, downtown, what comes to mind and my concern here is that should we limit it to the downtown? I know that that's the direction everybody's thinking downtown, but I'm thinking we keep talking about one terminal. I don't know what the future's going to bring, whether there may be an opportunity for multiple terminals, more than one, maybe two. We have an international airport, and with this plan, you know, maybe it makes sense to look at, you know, can high-speed rail be brought to the international airport rather than, you know, other options? So I guess the thing is, my first thought is, yeah, the downtown makes sense, but do we at this point want to limit it to the downtown? And so my feeling is that word maybe should be taken out of B, the downtown. As I say, and we're all sitting here today thinking, oh, okay, CN corridor, that makes sense. Well, I don't know, because I don't want to limit anything. Maybe down the road, maybe also we should keep in mind there's another corridor there, the CP corridor. So, but nobody's talked about that. It's just like earlier on we dealt with another issue, you know, and it was introduced that maybe CP could operate on CN tracks, and maybe that might solve some of our BRT issues or concerns. So I just want to leave things open for and make sure that people are going to look at everything, look at the big picture, and not just focus on, okay, downtown has to be at the VIA station, the VIA station down the road may not make any sense at all, you know, and maybe we may have to look at a different site. There's other, like Bathurst, you know, there may be an opportunity there. I don't know. I'm certainly not a consultant. I'm certainly not an expert on high-speed rail, but just to say, okay, downtown, and we're all thinking via rail, that there's a location. In fact, the discussion was around, well, let's rip it down and we'll build a bigger, better. Well, maybe that won't work there. So, as I say, I really think I'd like to see the downtown, that word removed, because that may down the road not be the only location via rail for terminal. There may be better options. And and of course, why limit yourself to one terminal? Maybe in the future, 2 terminals might make sense. I don't know. So in any event, I'll wait to the end of the discussion because I can see a couple other hands go up. But I would like an opportunity to perhaps look at just removing that word. But I'd like to hear from the other councillors first.
Okay, well, let's go to Councillor Squire.
Yeah, I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves, Mr. Chair. I think all it says is that a downtown be considered. It doesn't say that's where it's going to be or has to be. All it's doing is putting that option in play. And I assume after staff does their due diligence, if those considerations are that it not go downtown and it goes somewhere else, we'll be presented with that. So I think there's a danger in taking out taking out the word downtown London, because I think then the message we're sending to someone else is we want to take downtown somehow out of the equation. I think it'll be tough to explain why we decided to take that word out. So I think if spending a lot more time on these kind of worries is not what we should be doing, and we should be going ahead with downtown as a consideration, not the final answer.
Thank you, Councillor Zafman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, my apologies. I didn't plan on speaking on this, but just on this point of downtown, just for quick consideration, I think, as Councillor Squire said, it's a consideration, and it will come back at some future point. We're very, very, very early stages right now. Also, just consider, Grand Central Station, stations, downtown Toronto. I think, when you're looking at where everything is, it's a central station in the center of the city. So, to me, that just makes sense that we consider that as the spot.
Thank you. Councillor Ridley, did you have another comment?
I did, thank you, Chair. I moved this motion, I think as soon as the clerk opened it up, because I support the motion. I support this conversation. I support endorsing moving forward. I think one thing that I thought was clear, but maybe isn't, is this isn't a City of London project, right? This is a provincial project, and we're simply endorsing the concept and moving forward. This isn't necessarily something that we will be working on as a council, but rather we will be responding to the province and the direction and being a part of that collaboration. So I think maybe I could get some clarity on it, because some of the comments led me to believe that perhaps I hadn't understood that correctly.
Through the chair, that's absolutely correct. It is a provincial project led by the province. They've got a process to engage and collaborate with us, and we intend to be a strong voice at that table, but it is a provincial responsibility.
So I think with that in mind, I think this is a good thing for London. I think that we need to continue to endorse and be supportive of the project and continue to be involved with it, receiving regular updates and providing input where it makes sense for us to do that. So I'm glad that I moved in, that I did understand what I was reading correctly, and I'll be happy to support this.
Councillor Armstrong.
Since there's no other speakers, I guess the thing is, I'm happy to support this, because I think the fact that, the issue's been raised, that it appears to me that from the discussion that, yeah, the primary focus would be the downtown, but, since it is a province-led initiative, it's in their hands. But I just want to make sure that that people understand in the community that this is all options will be looked at, I'm sure, and I hope the province will look at all options and not just say, well, London, because we understand they had a discussion about via rail station and that it's on the CN track, and the word downtown, well, it's kind of downtown via station on the tracks. I mean, I look down the road and I think, via rail station, and we're going to bring the BRT there and integrate all this. I mean, next thing you know, obviously that station, we've all been there. It probably wouldn't be adequate in the future for this kind of project. That would be my thought. So next you're looking at buying adjacent properties. you know, taking down the VIA station, building something newer, bigger, that can accommodate this kind of plan. And I'm not against that, but I'd have to see the plan. But I just hope that everybody will not just focus on the downtown, the VIA station, and that's it, and that's the message the province gets, you know, receives from our community, but rather we hope that at this stage and go forward that they'll look at the whole picture, not just focus on those issues. Thank you. I'll support the motion because I've heard that that's sort of where things are going.
Okay, any further comments on this? If you're at home and you haven't read the report, if it isn't exciting enough, the province has also suggested that the first stop going towards Toronto, well, into Toronto, would be Pearson International Airport. So we'd stop there before going downtown Toronto. So that is also a great thing for people who like to travel and fly out of Toronto. So at this point, I see no one else interested in speaking. So let's call that question.
Opening the vote. Closing the vote. Motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. So, councillors, that brings us to the end of our consent items. We have a couple of items on the added agenda. So let's move to item number 21. So this is a submission from the mayor and Councillor Turner, who we also welcome to our committee meeting. So perhaps I could go to you, Mr. Mayor.
If I could, Chair, if you'd consider going to Councillor Turner. This is an issue that he flagged for me, and we both took a very serious look at and chose to write a letter to committee to just identify two competing sets of rules and an unintended consequence that may very much adversely affect residents living on essentially what's a dead-end street that would see 20 mature trees being removed based on a policy that I think is intended to do in most cases exactly what we want to see, but not in this particular situation. So if I could hand my time over to Councillor Turner, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Turner, we'll point out that staff has prepared a couple slides if you think it'd be valuable to see those first, but welcome to speak to this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With your indulgence, I'll do a quick preamble, and I think staff might be able to answer the other questions that come out of that. I come to the committee today asking your support to halt the installation of the sidewalk on Trowbridge Avenue. As you know, I've been very much a proponent of the sidewalks and the sidewalk plan that council developed through the official plan. In fact, having come to council before, asking the installation of that sidewalk occur on Auburn Ave. I was a supporter of the sidewalk in Oak Ridge as well. This circumstance became a little different a few weeks ago. It was brought to light that in the installation of the sidewalk, there would be the requirement for the removal of the entire stretch of trees on the western side of the road. So this puts us in a competition between our trees policy and our sidewalks policy, both of which exist in our official plan. The entire streetscape is characterized by these trees. It would all the trees would have to be removed. They discovered during the kind of the pre-installation consultation at this phase that those trees wouldn't be able to be preserved. So it comes as a bit of late notice. The street itself is a bit of a dead-end street. It runs from Springbank Drive down towards Greenway Park. There's no connection into the park from there. There is one street that at the end, at the northern end of Trowbridge, that extends to the east from there. So in terms of neighborhood connectivity, it's pretty low. In terms of priorities in areas where we would want to install sidewalks, it's not necessarily consistent with that. I do recognize the challenge between where we've been before and where we are here. I think this is a bit of a unique situation, and I ask the indulgence of the committee to consider that circumstance, and I'll look to staff to be able to present a little bit more for that too.
Okay, thank you. Well, perhaps if it's fine with the committee, we can see some other photos of this, which also might be valuable for the people at home following this debate, as it is an added item. So staff is preparing to put those up.
Through the chair, I'd just like to provide a little bit more background. Councillor Turner gave a very concise summary of this, but I'll put a little bit more complexity into here as well. I'd like just to start with, this is an image looking southerly on Trowbridge. Those red lines indicate the location of where the sidewalk is proposed. You'll see that in this case, it's definitely very confined. We have a set of hydro poles on one side. We have a number of trees that we've been told by the public were planted for Canada's centennial that are right beside the curb, and a huge difficulty in trying to align all these constraints. I just will note that there was a report to March 7th, Civic Works Committee, that did outline that there was a number of tree-related infrastructure renewal program projects that were going to be causing substantial numbers of trees coming down. This Trowbridge Ave was indicated in that report. However, at that time, there was only about 7 that were identified for removal. When we go through these projects, we try our best to maintain as many trees as possible, and we find that there's just increasing challenges when we're trying to incorporate new infrastructure like a sidewalk. So the residents were notified that there was approximately 7 that were going to be removed, and upon a field visit that included the consultant's arborist, as well as city forestry staff, and the contractor that's been awarded this job, it was indicated that 20 trees had to come down. So 9 of those 20 have to come down for health and construction conflicts, so either way they have to be removed. And as well, 11 are directly related to the sidewalk. And as indicated, this would result in the removal of almost all the mature trees on the west side of Trowbridge. This next figure, it's a little bit difficult to see on the black and white version, but this kind of just points out in a little bit more clarity. The red X's, so everything with an X is going to be removed based on the current design. The red X's indicate the trees that will be removed for the sidewalk installation, and the blue X's have to be removed for health reasons and for construction conflicts. So this this indicates that even though if the sidewalk does not is not installed, there is a substantial number of trees that will still come down, but there are 11 mature trees that will be removed if the sidewalk goes forward.
Thank you. Let's go to questions from the committee. Councillor Armstrong.
Just to staff. So for the listeners out there, trees that have to be removed for health reasons. Can you explain what it means, health reasons, for those who are listening out there?
Through the chair. So those are trees that have, for the most part, reached the end of their lives. So they may still be standing up there. They still have some greenery. However, they're starting to become a risk to the people in and around the area. So there's risk that the limbs may fall off, and our forester and the arborist would suggest that they wouldn't live much longer anyways. So in those cases, we recommend as part of these projects removing those trees.
Yeah, I understand that trees have to be somewhat robust in order to survive a construction project, and the older ones may not do so. Any other questions about this? If I may, I have one through the chair. So we look like, it looks like we can't put a sidewalk on the west side. What about the east side? That seems to be a question that should be answered.
Through the chair. So we have looked at a plethora of different options out here. So on the east side, unfortunately, there's grading constraints on that side, issues with grading and drainage and driveway conflicts. in addition, just from the perspective of tree removals, in the case of incorporating the sidewalk on the east side, we'd be removing 15 trees as you compare to 11 trees for the sidewalk on the west side.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Ridley.
Just one quick question on this. I noticed that a lot of the sidewalk design for London is very much parallel to the road standard width. I've just spent 2 weeks in a dozen other municipalities, and I noticed a number of different designs, including kind of moving with the natural trees and natural course, sometimes narrowing to allow for tree growth. Has any of that been looked at in this project, or are we trying to do the parallel to the street standard width design?
Thank you, through the chair to the councillor. The reason why we have a standard really is from an operational perspective. In the winter, if it's not in the straight line, if it's weaving its way between trees, I can guarantee you we'll be coming back in the spring, putting back a lot of sod. I want to make sure we have a certain width for the blade of the sidewalk plow as well. Is a common issue that we deal with here in the spring is related to the whole issue of sidewalk clearing, as well as then the damage that it's done. So realistically, we also want to make sure that sidewalk width is large enough from accessibility perspective as well. So that is how we've come down to the standard that we currently have.
I'll just follow up. The chair's okay with that. So does that come into play frequently? Like when we've run into this, and I'm thinking about East Mile, there's some issues with the trees as well. Is the fact that we do sidewalk snow removal a part of the issue of why we're having to remove more trees? Does it factor in at all? Because I recognize the sidewalk plows are standard. They've got, the size blade. I just wonder, is meeting one need or providing one benefit to the City of Londoners residents actually taking away another?
Through the chair to council, it's all about trade-offs. End of the day, the service we're going to provide. In this case here, there is no option of curb face sidewalk, given that the trees are actually planted right behind the curb itself. In a situation like this, when you start doing construction, those trees originally were not ideally planted in a great location. They're right behind the curb. You see along many of the streets, trees that are actually leaning. And that really has to do with the root ball itself not being allowed to grow on one side or the other because there's some sort of constraint. And in this situation here, when you've looked at all the various options, there really is only one place for the sidewalk, being behind those trees. And if you can, in other projects we've gone forward and try to mitigate them, put the sidewalk in, hope the trees survive. I can give you a number of examples where we've done very creative solutions to try to save those trees. But I can tell you 2 years later, we come back and take them down because they don't survive the construction. It's really not something that they can survive. You're eating into their root ball and where they're located. So in this case, it's about competing interests, as the councillor has indicated. If we want to have accessible, walkable community, or do we want to have the trees here, and as well as the whole issue related to sidewalk clearing at the end of the day.
I'll follow up, and I wonder if someone can just scroll back to the other picture that was before, because I think your answer was long and it was comprehensive and it was good, and I think you covered a couple more things than what I was asking. So it would be fair to say that between the snowplow and snow removal in trees, that's where some of the trade-off comes in. Because we're doing snow removal, we can't look at doing an S pattern that kind of allows the trees, because we're going to construct on the road regardless. So there's going to be construction damage or risk. So then my question comes to the sidewalk, and it's not even specific to this, but it's something that was flagged for me, saying, if we get into these situations, is it because we're trying to snowplow and snow remove that we're saying, well, we can't have those trees because now we can't maneuver blades like this without causing damage. So I guess the question is more to the snow removal, not so much going to impact my decision here, but I wonder how much of this is impacting each other. And I don't know that I've been aware of that before, saying, you know, part of the reason that we have the sidewalk design that we have or that we utilize is because of those trade-offs or those other services. So that's kind of what I'm getting to. And if it makes sense to come back at another time with some more information, I'm okay with that as well.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor. If there's situations where we need to put a curve into the sidewalk, as much as we obviously would not want to do that, we do that to help mitigate the issue. In this case here, it is a straight shot, as you see in that picture there. We're going straight down there. So in this particular case, I wouldn't really say that weaving the sidewalk is an issue or the sidewalk plowing is an issue in this particular case.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This photo here doesn't show the tops of the trees and they're fully grown. So, because you mentioned they've reached their lifespan, I'm just wondering, can you tell me, has the tops of these trees been, you know, cut by hydro at any point? Are they in the hydro lines and that sort of thing? Because that has a lot to do. I see some streets where the trees literally don't have a center and they become very unstable, or one side's been chopped so much to keep it out of the hydro lines. How are these trees?
Through the chair, that's actually a great point. The trees that are along the west side have been trimmed substantially due to the location being very close to the hydro lines. And that's another risk factor that we've identified as far as locating this sidewalk. Once you take weight off one side of the tree starts to go in the other direction. And if you get too close to those structural roots that are right beside which is what would happen with a sidewalk being located so close to the trees, it puts that additional risk that the tree may fall over. So yes, if you, going down to Trowbridge, unfortunately I don't have a photo that shows this, but there's been substantial trimming around the hydro lines on the west side.
The second point I wanted to raise was cutting of the trees. I guess the thing is, and the residents obviously are faced with losing that nice tree on their lawn, and the standard tree that we replace them with quite often are, you know, not very big. So I'm wondering, is there an opportunity here to look at perhaps using something other than our standard tree? Because using our standard tree, when there's no tree there before, is one thing. But when people have experienced, you know, a mature tree, and then to go down to our standard tree, it's like no tree at all. It takes years for them to get where you've got a nice top on a tree. Is there an opportunity here, and how much more would it be to replace these trees with something, and I forget what you call the trucks that bring in the trees and put them in the ground, something of that nature, maybe double the size. Would that be a lot more money to do something like that so that they have decent trees sooner than later?
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. I'm going to endeavor to try to answer that. In terms of standard size, we do have a standard size that we put in there. But we do have flexibility. If we want to bring in a tree that's a little bit larger, it will cost more. I don't have those actual costs that I can quote you, but on certain projects, we will look at potentially bringing in larger trees.
So is this one of those projects that you could report back to us on that opportunity, what the potential cost would be, so that, you know, we can try to mitigate their loss?
Through the chair, yeah, there'd be no problem to do that, absolutely.
Well, I don't know how the committee feels about that, but, or the councillor for the ward and the mayor, but if the decision is the trees have to be removed, would they support making an effort to replace them with as mature tree as we can, even if there is additional cost. So I'll leave that, I put that question through you to the ward councillor and to the mayor, how they would feel about that.
Okay, let's go to the ward councillor, just regarding the larger caliber trees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for your question, Councillor Armstrong. The challenge here ultimately will be where that could be located, and that presupposes that the sidewalk goes in and the trees come down, and then the trees have to grow back up again. So it's a bit more of an order of operations thing, even if we got that report. The construction on the street is imminent. I believe they've got equipment on site right now. They've just halted the tree clearing for the sidewalk portion of this construction at this point. It came to light at a pretty late point in the project, so that's why it's before you right now. So I think there would be challenges in doing that. If the trees ultimately have to come out, I think it would be helpful to see large caliper trees go in as replacements, but I'm not sure how feasible that is.
Right, and I have a comment from staff, Mr. Soldo.
Thank you, Chair. One point of clarification here. The curb is being replaced in this project. And I can tell you through lots of past experience in projects like this, as soon as you touch that curb, you are cutting the roots of those trees down. And those trees will have very limited lifespan afterwards. So notwithstanding if you want to put in a sidewalk or not, those trees have a limited lifespan, because once you take that curb out, you have to put the forming in to replace that curb. You're eating into the root ball of that curb, of that tree, sorry. Those trees are so close to that curb that they have very limited lifespan if you put a sidewalk in or not.
Councillor Armstrong.
Well, it seems pretty clear to me, and I've seen this kind of situation before. Those trees are really close, and so I think our staff is correct, and their advice is good, that these trees will definitely lose a lot of their roots. So, but I really think depending on where the committee goes on this, I really think though that we should make an effort to replace these trees with something as mature as what we can come up with, just so that we mitigate the loss here. I think that would make a lot of sense. So in any event, I'm going to support that we don't take any action on this. But and if the motion passes, then I think a second motion that we ask staff to do what we can about installing the most mature trees available on the market.
Thank you. Councillor Squire.
This is very easy for me. I mean, the councillor and the mayor provided the applicable the policies. They apply. The trees should be saved, and we have the ability to do that. So I support what they're doing. I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves again, which we sometimes do. Now we're assuming they're going to die, and we're assuming we're going to have to put in new trees. I will be prepared to say a little prayer for the trees next time I go to church on Sunday and see if that has any great effect. I hope it does. So I hope we'll just focus on what we're doing here and get on with that and save these trees, and let's see what happens.
Councillor Helmer.
Obviously, I can't vote on the issue here, but I won't be supporting the request from Councillor Turner or the mayor. The exception in the policy is to allow for sidewalks to be on one side of the street, not to have no sidewalks. So we're supposed to have sidewalks on both sides of the street, and when there are constraints that prevent it from being feasible, the compromise is to have them on one side. And I understand the desire to keep mature trees alive as long as possible and performing their ecosystem function. That's great. We're going to have conflicts like this. We won't be back to reconstruct this road or work underground for quite some time if we do all this work properly. And what that means is that for that entire time period, there will be no sidewalks in this area. It's been described as a dead-end street. It's not a dead-end street. It does connect into other parts of the road network, which also don't have sidewalks. There's also a bus stop out on Springbank right at the end of the road on the west side of Trowbridge. And I think if you want people to use active modes of transportation, you have to provide the facilities they need to do that. There's lots of things we need to do on trees. I've always advocated for more budgets for trees. I think we have to think very carefully about the design, how we do these things so that we can avoid these conflicts in the future. The major constraint on this particular part of the road network is frankly the hydro being up on poles and not underground. I think we would have a bit more flexibility if the trees had not been planted the way they were planted in the past. You know, compromises like, you know, narrowing the actual road pavement, if there was a possibility to do that, I would be interested in that. Just not having sidewalks at all, I'm not interested in. There's a lot of streets that don't have a lot of traffic that need sidewalks. And this principle is basically like, well, there's not a lot of traffic in terms of pedestrians, so we won't build sidewalks there. And that is a huge number of the streets that need sidewalks are streets like that. And so I don't like that as a principle. I wouldn't support it as a policy. And frankly, this is coming way, way too late. Like there's a construction letter that's already gone out. All the design is already done, everything. And I just want to emphasize the compromise when we have these conflicts is to have them on one side. This seems like the best side to have them on. I support this design, even though it means losing all those trees. Last thing I'll say is, you know, when we had that report in March and it said, hey, we looked at this one and it said 25 to 30 trees were going to be dropped. And then we did all this extra work. I remember reading that and being like, that's great. I'm so glad we did this extra work and got this design and reduced it from 25 down to 7. That's great. And then we're back to 20. It's like, what was I don't understand really what happened there. And that's really problematic. I don't know exactly what to say about that, but I'm glad we're looking for those things and trying to minimize them. Sometimes it's unavoidable. And I would rather see more trees planted, you know, somewhere else in this neighborhood or further back onto people's properties or what have you.
Yes, it's unfortunate we didn't think of many of these things in our past lives as city councillors. But I'll go to Councillor Armstrong.
I just wondered, lighting on this street, currently I see the telephone posts there. Is the lighting on those posts? Is that, so you have the lighting back and then you have the trees. Has anybody been out there at night? Do those trees sort of stop the light at certain times of year from getting through? Because I know in my ward, some streets, because I've got some situations almost identical to this, that the roads are black at night, even though there's lights on. So, you know, I'm constantly thinking, cut the trees. People are walking on the road. They're going to get hit. There's no light. Can you sort of give me a picture of what the lighting, what's going on there?
Through the chair, I have traveled there at night, and it is definitely quite spotty. So in some locations, like for example, in this location, the light is on. So firstly, the lighting is mounted on the hydro poles. So you're absolutely correct with that one. And it is quite spotty as you move down the street. There are locations where there's no tree canopy and the light is very visible, and then parts where it's partially obscured as well. Now there has been quite a bit of, as we suggested before, trimming of the trees on the west side, so that has cleared up a little bit of those issues. But like any kind of these more built out areas that are mature, lighting is partially obscured by the tree growth.
So, well, of course, we hope that most people will be traveling along the new sidewalk. The new sidewalk will be lit better, and I think the street generally, if those trees are removed, I'm assuming that you're going to plant the type of tree that you're going to, down the road, get as much light out on the sidewalk, on the street, across the street even. You're not going to plant trees that are going to grow up into the lights, but rather out and limited height. Am I right about that?
Through the chair, with any of these infrastructure renewal programs, we have a comprehensive tree planting plan, so it accounts for all of those different factors. So yes, that is something that's considered when we locate the new trees.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, from the chair, ask a question. First, I'll ask our clerk to put a potential motion on the floor from Councillor Turner, so the committee could entertain moving that. But my question is this: because we've got a good number of trees that have reached the end of their life, and those are coming down, I would assume that a number of these other trees are around the same age, and so could potentially within the next 10 years be in a similar situation. And if those come down, then we would be in a position to put in a sidewalk. So have we got a future plan for that? Is there something we can do on this street to prepare for a sidewalk sooner than later?
So through the chair, talking to some of the folks with more tree expertise than I have, as I noted before, the trees that are planted along the curb line were part of apparently a centennial celebration, and they were centennial trees, so they're exactly 50 years old right now. My understanding, talking to our arborist and the forestry group as well, is that these Norway maples, they usually have a life of between 60 and 80 years. So some of them, and it really depends on the location, of course, with their health would be. And as you can see, as I'd mentioned before, some of them have been significantly trimmed, so that has led to possibly a shorter lifespan as well. So you could be looking in the next 10, 15 to 20 years, some of these trees starting to just die off naturally. And but as far as any kind of future planning, that would be based on the opinion of the resolution by committee and council, whether the sidewalk moves forward.
Okay, so thank you. And if we were to plant trees in here, can we plant them in a place that would not interfere with a future sidewalk?
Through the chair, absolutely. We have identified a location where that sidewalk could be located. So if there was a council direction, then we would ensure that we wouldn't plant trees that would have any kind of conflict with that future location.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for any more further comments. Perhaps Councillor Turner would care to wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee for your comments. I do recognize the sensitivity and the conflict and the timing and all of those things. And right up to this point, I've been in discussions with the residents in the neighborhood, advocating for the sidewalk, telling them that the sidewalk needs to go in. I've been tried to be as consistent as possible in supporting these infrastructure projects, and I think they're important and essential. Recognizing the significant change in the impact to the neighborhood as a result of the loss of the entire streetscape, the trees on the western side, that was a point at which I thought it was very important to bring to this committee. I thank the mayor for his support with this, and I certainly thank staff for all the work that they've done in trying to mitigate the impacts to the trees along this route. I do know that they take that very seriously, and it wouldn't be before you if they didn't think it's serious as well. So thank you for your time, and I do hope that you'll support the recommendation that's on the floor right now.
Okay, the recommendation is on the floor, and it's been moved by Mayor Brown and seconded by Councillor Squire. So, committee, I'll give you an opportunity to look at that, ask if there's any more questions or comments on this, and then we can proceed to a vote. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, the fact that, for me, that Councillor Turner is bringing this forward says it all. Councillor Turner has demonstrated over the past 2.5 years his dedication to things like the London Plan, to many of our active transportation plans, and also has demonstrated what I would describe as great courage at times when constituents of his have indicated that for their neighborhood reason, they don't want an issue to move forward, but he looks at the bigger picture and he says, this is the right direction to go. In this particular situation, a commitment was really made to this neighborhood that a small number of trees would have to be removed, and that changed at the very last minute. Just less than 2 weeks ago, this was brought to the councilor's attention and to my attention, to the neighborhood's attention. We are the Forest City. This is a street that is going to lose some trees or almost all of the trees, and it's up to us. It's a sidewalk that is not needed at this time in this specific location, and I think it's one where, although we have policy, there's also room for judgment and there's room for common sense. And Councillor Turner, I think, is bringing both of those to the floor when he asks for our consideration as a committee and when he'll ask for council's consideration to make an exception. And this is not something I would expect Councillor Turner to do very regularly. He hasn't demonstrated to do that, but in this particular case, this is the right direction to go. I believe that firmly. And I'd ask my committee colleagues to support Councillor Turner's request as the ward councillor.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the question, give you the opportunity to support or not that request.
Opening the vote. Closing the vote. Motion pass 4-1.
Okay, so we have two other items to deal with. One is item number 20, our deferred matters list, and the next is item number 22. Perhaps we'll just go in order and deal with our deferred matters list. So
You're leaving 22 or you're going with 22?
we'll do 22 last.
Okay. Because I think the mayor may want to leave, and I wanted to make sure the mayor is here for 22 also.
Okay, well, we can deal with, the committee's fine, we can deal with 22. That's certainly something that the mayor has been asked to be here for, so thank you, Councillor, we'll go with that. And I'll look first for comment from Councillor Ridley.
Thank you. I do want to reiterate my conflict on the matter. I do own property in the area that would be impacted. That being said, I would once again like to reiterate my concern about the process, which I feel that I can speak on. This matter was advertised as being on tomorrow's agenda. Today, shortly before the meeting, I found out it's on today's agenda. If there are members from the public who show up tomorrow, they're going to be very angry that council and committee decided to deal with this a day early because it was on the wrong agenda. So I do have a conflict on the item. I don't believe I have a conflict on the process, and I believe that this process is incorrect and needs to be rectified, whether that be dealing with it on tomorrow's agenda, even though it's on the wrong committee, but that's what's advertised to the public, or deferring it to a future meeting. So I won't be speaking to the item, but I do caution my colleagues on dealing with this item today when the public has had no notice.
Thank you very much. Perhaps we can get a comment from the clerk on the provision of notice to the public with respect to this. I know it's certainly an important item for a number of people.
If we've not been notified, or I'm not aware of individuals coming to speak to this matter, it's not a public participation meeting, but certainly what the good councillors mentioned does have some merit in terms of just because somebody's not intending to come and speak, they may wish to be present for when the matter is dealt with, or if they're looking online, they may indeed want to be looking online at the time that they expected it to be heard. Certainly it's up to the committee as to how they wish to proceed, but there is certainly both sides to that.
All right, well, I think I'd be willing to entertain a discussion about it, just to see where that would go. So to Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess, Mr. Chair, unless there's some great urgency, is there any opportunity here to perhaps refer this to the next meeting? I think that's the only, perhaps the only solution to the issue. I mean, I don't know if anybody will come to tomorrow or not, but the thing is, and if this was an urgent issue, then I could see us pushing ahead right away. It's something certainly I'm interested in hearing more about, looking at, and it does affect our community, or could. So, in fact, it's an issue that will potentially affect all of Ontario or southwestern Ontario. So I'd like to move that we refer this to our next meeting. And there again, make sure that, I'm sure the counselor or will make sure that anyone interested will be here and to listen, though it's not a public participation meeting. But I think the thing is, we don't want to move ahead and discuss something if people want to be here and listen to the discussion, especially because of oversight. And that's the only reason. If there was no oversight, then I'd be prepared to deal with this today. But just because there's an oversight, I wouldn't want one person to think that they didn't have an opportunity to be here in person as allowed. So I don't know how other members, but I'll move that motion when the time is right.
Mr. Mayor, I think you've indicated you're willing to second this. Do you have any comments on the?
No, I'm willing to second it. I think the councilor's right. There isn't a level of urgency here. It looks like there was a process issue. It ended up on the wrong agenda. It's now on the right agenda. And if we push this to next cycle, for example, I think that there won't be any negative effects. Also, I'll draw to your attention to the communication that's posted online. Council did take a stance on this, not this council, but London City Council did in, I think it was January of 2013. And so I'm happy to support the referral to the next cycle for all the reasons stated by Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you very much. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, you said that the previous council took a stance. I think some of the people at home listening might be interested in what that stance is. So I could, if I could ask you or the clerk to describe that.
Yes, council did pass a resolution that indicated that in order to protect the Great Lakes and its tributary, it urges that neither the proposed nuclear waste repository near Kincardine, Ontario, nor any other underground nuclear waste repository be constructed in the Great Lakes Basin, in Canada, in the US, or on any First Nations property. So they were quite clear in their position on the matter at the time.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know that will have changed. I'll go to Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this. I'm the one who asked for this to be on this agenda, but it ended up on the Community and Protective Services Committee, and that's where I expected to speak. So I'm really glad to see that it's going to come back to this. I'm not so sure that there's any timeline that is required. I believe that having it come back to the next cycle will be appropriate. But for the people at home, I just want to make sure that we understand that what this is asking for is for the mayor's signature to a letter to be added to over 200 other signatures in the Great Lakes area, both within our confines, to send to the minister of whatever he is to try to stop them from doing this burial in the Kincardine area. And that's really what this coming here is all about. We've already passed a motion to say that we object to that way back in 2013. So this detail here is just to ask that the mayor add his signature to this letter that is on page 14 of the added agenda. That's what we're asking for in this motion. So referring it to the next meeting, I think it will be quite okay. I would prefer, because there is somebody who will be paying attention to this tomorrow. I know that. But I'm sure that that person would be happy to know that it's going to be taken care of 2 weeks from now.
Thank you. And if I may, to the clerk, a process question. Given the council's previous stance, would it be appropriate for the mayor to simply sign that position? Or does council need to direct him to do so in this case?
The council would need to consider that, and I would point out that that letter did go out to a number of parties, including the body that was overseeing the project originally, as well as local elected representatives. Often the City of London has chosen to craft its own resolutions and own letters. And if this council felt that the message that was previously sent was sufficient, but they wanted to expand that circulation to the minister, they could even simply just say that the original resolution be circulated to the minister as well.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Armstrong.
Well, I think the thing is, this issue is of significant importance that we should have. It's a new council. We should have the discussion again, and you know, if it's the will of council, to send a letter and continue to support. But it's a new council, and things can change. I know I won't change my position on it, but I'm sure that some of the new councillors would certainly like to make their views clear on this issue as well. So I think if the mayor is going to send another letter, then it should be with the endorsement of the current council. And of course, we already know the position of the past council. So I think that would be appropriate, since this is you know, in front of us now, to take that position, because some time has elapsed. And if we were just to forget the issue and just look at you know, a council took a position on an issue in the past, things can change. So we don't want to sort of set the precedent that once it's done, that whatever the issue is, that, you know, automatically, you know, a new council, you know, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. I think it's got to be reaffirmed.
All right, well, that reaffirmation has gone to referral. It's been moved and seconded. Let's call the question.
Opening the vote. Closing the vote. Motion passed 4-0.
Oh, thanks. So, Councilor Usher, thank you for bringing that forward, and for the mayor for being here for that. That leaves us with our deferred matters list. So I'll go to committee to see if there's any questions respect to that list. Councilor Armstrong.
No, I don't have any questions, but I did want to just raise if there are, I had an inquiry.
Oh, okay. Well, we can consider that a part of additional business then. We just lost quorum.
Didn't realize that, but I was anticipating a long speech, so. All right, I'll stay now.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps then we can pass the deferred matters list, and then we'll go to an additional business, and then it'll be done. So I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the deferred matters list. Moved by Councillor Armstrong. And seconded by Councillor Squire. Thank you. So let's call that question.
Opening the vote. Closing the vote. Whoops, not yet. Yep, closing the vote. Motion passed 3-0.
Well done. Okay, Councillor Armstrong.
Well, I just want to pass on my inquiry is to do with road work being done in East London. I've noticed that there's been a lot of activity, a lot of roads being repaired, partial replacements, some new strategies that I haven't seen in the past. So I just want to pass on to our staff, from the city engineer on down, you know, that I'm getting a lot of good feedback from residents, compliments on work underway to do with sidewalks. I've had a number of compliments on how our staff is, you know, doing the work, and that also there's been flexibility, you know, with re-looking at projects as they're going along and reevaluating. And so I just want to make sure that our staff from top on down including those out in the field, are doing an excellent job, and I'm getting a lot of feedback. So quite often, I know people get criticized for not doing whatever, but in this case, I want to make sure you understand I'm getting a lot of positive feedbacks about our work.
Well, that's great. It's nice to see the responsiveness on the part of staff is making a difference out there. Would you, staff, care to comment on that?
Thank you through the chair. We appreciate that feedback, and I'll make sure that it's passed on to all of our staff involved in the work.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I've got a motion for adjournment. Councillor Squire is happy to second that. So all in favor? Yes, there we are. Have a good night.